She lived in a house where silence was punished and obedience was survival. Her brother's cruelty was the only language she knew, until one night, she whispered to the moon for freedom. But when the vampire king answered her prayer, was it mercy that came for her, or something far darker? Chapter 1: The Prison of Silk and Shadows. The moon hung like a dying candle over the Dumont keep, its pale light spilling through the narrow window of Alethea's chamber. The stone walls breathed cold against her skin, whispering of a freedom she had long forgotten. She traced the cracks in the mortar with trembling fingers, pretending they were roads leading far beyond the cruelty that ruled this house. Her brother, Lord Cedric Dumont, was a man whose heart had rotted long before their parents' death. To the kingdom, he was noble and loyal. To Alethea, he was the weight of chains she could never lift. Tonight, his anger had been born from something as small as her silence at dinner. He hated silence. It reminded him of the father he had disappointed and the sister he could not control. When he struck her, it was not with rage but with ownership. The echo of his palm across her face lingered longer than the sting, and the metallic tang of blood in her mouth tasted of humiliation. Yet Alethea did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears only fed his satisfaction. When he left her alone, she crawled to the window, gazing toward the black line of the distant forest, the land whispered to belong to the vampire king, Klaus Mikaelson. Mothers told tales of him to frighten their children, the immortal tyrant who drank the blood of sinners and made lovers of the damned. But Alethea had always listened differently. She heard something in those stories, an ache, a yearning, a promise of escape through the darkness. She pressed her bruised cheek against the chill of the glass and whispered, "If you are real, take me from here." Outside, the wind rose, carrying with it the scent of something ancient. Somewhere deep in the night, a single wolf howled, and the shadows seemed to move in answer. The howl fades, but Alethea feels unseen eyes upon her, and for the first time, she does not feel alone in her cage. Chapter 2: The Summoning at Dawn. By dawn, the keep buzzed with strange unease. Servants hurried through corridors whispering of an envoy that had arrived before sunrise, black carriages with crimson crests, their banners marked by a sigil none dared speak aloud. Alethea, still nursing her swollen cheek, was dragged by a maid to the great hall. Cedric stood at the head of the chamber, a forced smile upon his lips, though his eyes darted with barely restrained fear. Before him stood a messenger, clad in armor dark as midnight, his voice low and deliberate. By decree of His Majesty, King Klaus Mikaelson of the Crimson Throne, Lord Dumont and his household are summoned to the royal court before the week's end. Refusal is treason. A silence fell so heavy it seemed to choke the air. The vampire king had not called upon mortals in decades. Rumors said he ruled from the shadows, concerned only with old bloodlines and ancient debts. Cedric's knuckles whitened. "This must be a mistake," he muttered. But Alethea knew. Somewhere deep in her bones, she felt the pull, like the night itself had reached into her chest. The words she'd whispered to the darkness last night now returned to her, echoing like a curse. When the messenger's gaze flicked to her, his expression changed. Recognition, or was it pity? He inclined his head slightly, and his voice softened when he spoke again. "His Majesty requests the Lady Alethea's presence most urgently." Cedric's hand clamped down on her shoulder, sharp and possessive. "My sister will go nowhere without me." The messenger's lips curved faintly. "Then I suggest you start preparing, my lord. The king does not like to be kept waiting." As the envoy departs, Cedric's grip tightens in fury. Alethea realizes her whispered plea has been heard, and answered. Chapter 3: The Wolf in Crimson Velvet. The royal court was a cathedral of power carved from black stone and candlelight. It smelled of iron, incense, and old secrets. Alethea walked beside her brother, her gaze fixed on the floor, every heartbeat echoing in the cavernous silence. Then the air shifted. Power moved like a living thing, brushing against her skin, raising every fine hair on her neck. The throne at the end of the hall was occupied. King Klaus Mikaelson sat with the stillness of a predator, his eyes, ancient gold ringed with blood, locked on her from the moment she entered. The room dissolved. Her breath caught in her throat. Something in her blood recognized him. Cedric bowed deeply, his tone oily with false respect. "Your Majesty honors House Dumont with this audience. My sister bears your bruises," Klaus interrupted. His voice was velvet and fire, a low, dangerous rumble that made the candles flicker. "You strike what is yours to protect." Cedric froze, color draining from his face. "A family matter." Not anymore. The king rose, every inch of him radiating command. His gaze never left Alethea's face. Lay a hand on her again. He stepped forward, his eyes burning brighter. And burn. The torches along the walls flared, fire roaring to life without touch or spark. The court gasped. Cedric stumbled back, the heat kissing his skin like a warning. Alethea trembled, but not from fear. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a burden, but as something worth defending. As flames reflected in Klaus's golden eyes, Alethea realized her fate had changed. She was no longer her brother's possession. She had become the Vampire King's claim. Chapter 4: The Journey Through the Veiled Woods. The carriage moved like a phantom through the fog-drenched forest. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and iron, and every creak of the wheels sounded like a heartbeat echoing through eternity. Alethea sat wrapped in a cloak far too fine for her station, the crimson sigil of the Vampire King embroidered on its hem. Across from her sat 2 silent knights of the Crimson Guard, their faces hidden behind dark steel. Between them lay a chest bound in silver chains, its purpose unknown, but its hum of magic unmistakable. Cedric rode behind, forced to follow on horseback under heavy watch. His arrogance had wilted since their meeting with Klaus. The burn marks on his wrists from the king's flame were reminder enough of his mortality. As the woods grew darker, Alethea began to notice eyes, glimmering amber shapes that followed the carriage's path, moving with unnatural speed. When she leaned toward the window, one of the guards finally spoke. "Do not look too long, my lady," he warned in a gravelly tone. "The forest sees what it wants, and it remembers faces." Alethea turned away, her pulse quickening. Yet she could not resist a final glance. For just a moment, she thought she saw him, a tall figure cloaked in shadows, walking among the trees, his eyes burning gold even in the mist. When lightning cracked across the heavens, the carriage jolted to a stop. Horses reared. A scent of blood filled the air. And then, from the tree line, came a low voice that seemed to vibrate in her bones. "You shouldn't have called for me if you didn't wish to be found." The carriage door swings open, revealing Klaus himself, bareheaded in the storm, eyes wild, and smile dangerous, presence consuming the space like smoke. The guards bowed wordlessly before vanishing into the storm, leaving Alethea alone with the King of Night. He settled across from her, his cloak dripping crimson onto the velvet seat. "You called to me," he said simply, "and I came." Alethea's voice trembled. I did not think you were real." Klaus tilted his head, studying her. "Does your fear make me any less so?" She swallowed hard, gaze dropping to her hands. He reached out, and with one gloved finger, lifted her chin. The touch was electric, soft but commanding. The faint mark of Cedric's blow still marred her cheek. His eyes darkened. "You heal slower than my kind," he murmured. "But your pain hums louder." Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, silence bloomed between them, thick, charged, intimate. Alethea dared to speak. "Why summon me, your majesty?" "Because," he said, leaning forward until his breath warmed her ear, "you belong to no man who hurts you. And I make it my sport to correct injustice." A flicker of something, dangerous, magnetic, passed between them. Alethea shivered, not from cold but from the weight of his gaze. He leaned back, half smiling. "Tell me, little dove, do you fear monsters?" She met his eyes for the first time. "Only the ones who wear crowns." His laughter filled the carriage, low and melodic, echoing like music born of darkness. The storm outside subsides as the carriage crosses into the crimson-lit valley, home of the vampire court. Alethea's new world begins. Chapter 6: The Crimson Court. The Crimson Castle loomed like something carved from a nightmare. Black stone spires crowned with flickering torches, its windows glowing faintly red from the bloodfire that burned within. The drawbridge descended with a heavy groan, and the carriage rolled into a courtyard lit by moonlight and mist. Alethea stepped out, her eyes wide. The courtyard was alive with whispers, vampires of every lineage watching from the shadows, their pale faces unreadable. Klaus offered his hand, and she hesitated only a moment before placing hers in his. His grip was cold, yet steady, an anchor in this sea of darkness. Inside, the grand hall shimmered with opulence. Crimson banners, marble floors veined with black, chandeliers of crystal filled with glowing red flame. Musicians played haunting melodies on stringed instruments that sounded almost human in their sorrow. "Welcome," Klaus announced to the gathering, The House of Dumont stands under my protection. Let any who dare raise a hand against them be ready to burn." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some bowed. Others hissed softly, discontent thick as perfume. Alethea felt the eyes of the court upon her, hungry, assessing, some envious, some cruel. At the far end of the hall, a woman stepped forward, Lady Vivienne, the king's advisor and rumored consort. Her beauty was venomous. She smiled at Alethea with perfect grace. "Your Majesty," she purred, "you bring home strays now." Klaus's gaze hardened. "Mind your tongue, Vivienne. The last who mocked my mercy choked on it." The tension hung heavy, and Vivienne bowed stiffly. Alethea said nothing, but in her heart, she understood. She had just been declared a player in a dangerous game. As the music resumed, Alethea felt Klaus's gaze find hers again from across the hall, intense, possessive, promising both salvation and ruin. Chapter 7: The Feast of Shadows. The night of Alethea's arrival was marked by a grand feast, an event held only when the king wished to make a statement. Tables stretched endlessly under candlelight, their surfaces gleaming with gold goblets and silver knives, the air thick with the scent of wine and something far richer, blood. Alethea sat beside Klaus upon the throne's lower dais, her heart a restless drum. Every noble eye in the hall measured her worth, whispering behind jeweled fans. She was mortal, fragile, human, and yet seated beside immortality itself. A violin's lament filled the hall. A servant approached with a goblet etched with runes, offering it to Klaus. He raised it, the crimson liquid within catching the light like a jewel. "To mercy," he declared, voice echoing through stone. "May it never be mistaken for weakness." Every vampire drank. Some with grace, others with hidden venom. As the feast continued, Alethea noticed a group of courtiers watching her from the far end of the hall. Their leader, Lord Lucien de Vera, had eyes the color of ice and a smile that promised nothing good. He approached the dais, bowing with mocking elegance. "My king," he said smoothly, "we celebrate Mercer tonight, but surely there are limits. A mortal, seated by your side, unmarked, unclaimed." Klaus's expression cooled like steel. "Do you suggest I prove ownership before witnesses?" Lucien's smile faltered, but his gaze slid toward Alethea. "Only that the court remembers your old ways, sire. Blood speaks clearer than words." The silence that followed was dangerous. Then, with deliberate slowness, Klaus reached for Alethea's hand. He lifted it, turning her wrist so that the pale skin caught the light. The crowd leaned forward. But instead of biting, he kissed it, softly, reverently. "Mine," he whispered. The court erupted in murmurs, both scandalized and enthralled. Lucien bows stiffly, defeated for now, but Alethea senses the whispers growing louder in the shadows, plotting her downfall. Chapter 8: The Garden of Eternal Night. Later that evening, unable to sleep, Alethea wandered through the castle's moonlit gardens. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of jasmine and nightshade. Pale roses bloomed under ghostly light, their petals tinged with silver. She trailed her fingers along the marble balustrade, trying to quiet her thoughts. She had been marked, not with blood, but with something far more intimate, the king's protection. And yet, what did that mean in a court where protection was often the first step toward possession? "Do you always walk alone at night?" a voice murmured behind her. She turned to see Klaus, cloaked in shadow, his eyes softened by something she couldn't name. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "The castle hums like it's alive." "It is," he said, stepping closer. "Built on old blood and older magic. Every stone remembers what it's seen." They walked together in silence. The world around them seemed to pause, the trees, the air, even the stars. Then Klaus stopped beside a fountain carved in the likeness of weeping angels. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch light but burning. "I brought you here," he said quietly, "not to cage you, but to protect you from a storm you do not yet understand." Her breath caught. "And what storm is that?" His gaze darkened. "The hunger that lies within every creature of the night, including me." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The tension between them shimmered, fragile and electric. Then Klaus turned away, retreating into the mist before temptation won. Alethea watches him disappear into the fog, realizing that the true danger is not his power, but her growing desire to trust him. Chapter 9: The Whispering Court. By dawn, the castle was alive with whispers. Servants carried rumors through marble halls like wind through reeds. The mortal girl had bewitched the king, they said. The court would not allow it. Lady Vivienne, the king's advisor, made no attempt to hide her disdain. She found Alethea in the library that morning, seated by the window, lost in a book of ancient vampire lore. You read as if words could save you, Vivienne said coolly. Alethea looked up. Knowledge is a kind of weapon, isn't it? Perhaps, Vivienne replied, circling her like a predator. But be careful, child. In this court, curiosity kills faster than thirst. Before Alethea could answer, the heavy doors opened and Lord Lucian strode in, his tone falsely cheerful. Ah, two beauties in one room. The king will have a difficult choice indeed. Vivienne's eyes flickered with contempt. Careful, Lucian. You might overstep again. Lucian only smiled, but his words dripped with poison. Tell me, Lady Dumont, have you wondered why the king summoned you? It was not mercy, nor pity. You have something he wants. Something he cannot take by force. Alethea froze. And what is that? Lucian's grin widened. Your blood sings with old magic, magic that predates even him. The door slammed open before she could respond. Klaus stood there, eyes glowing gold, fury crackling like lightning. Enough. Lucian bowed mockingly and slipped away. Vivienne followed, silent and smiling. Klaus approached Alethea, his voice rough with restraint. Do not listen to them. They seek to break what they cannot possess. But they're right, aren't they? She whispered. There's something you're not telling me. He looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said finally. And if I tell you the truth, you'll never see me the same way again. Alethea's world shifts. The man who saved her may be tied to a fate darker than any she's escaped. Chapter 10. The Chamber of Echoes. The chamber was carved deep beneath the Crimson Castle, a place where few dared tread. Its walls were black marble streaked with veins of silver that shimmered faintly in torchlight. Klaus led Alethea down the spiral stair, each step echoing with unspoken truths. Why here? She asked softly. Because lies have no power where the old blood sleeps, he replied. When they reached the bottom, she saw an altar, ancient, cracked, and engraved with runes older than language. Blood had once stained it, now turned to dark dust. The air hummed with restrained energy, alive yet mournful. Klaus stood before it, removing the ring from his finger. Before I became king, he began, I was cursed. Not merely as a vampire, but as something older, a hybrid between wolf and knight. A sin the gods themselves deemed unholy. Alethea's breath caught. A hybrid. He nodded slowly. Half beast, half immortal. My kind were meant to perish, yet I survived, because of her. He gestured toward the altar. The faint outline of a woman's figure, carved in stone, stared back at them. Her eyes were familiar. Alethea touched the engraving, and a tremor ran through her body. This woman was your ancestor, Klaus said quietly. Celine Dumont, the witch who bound my curse. Her blood flows in you, Alethea, and through it, the spell that keeps my soul chained. She turned to him, disbelief warring with awe. Then I'm the key. You are the choice, he corrected gently. Break the curse, and I'm free. Refuse, and I burn with you. Alethea stepped back, her mind spinning. He had saved her from her brother, from humiliation and pain, but it was never mercy alone. It was destiny. As the torches flickered, Alethea whispered, You needed me. Klaus's eyes softened. No, little witch, I found you. Chapter 11. The Mark of Fire. That night, Alethea could not sleep. The truth clawed at her thoughts, vivid as flame. Her entire life, the suffering, the dreams, the unexplainable pull to the shadows, had all been part of a design older than her own name. When she rose to dress, she found her chamber guarded by a young vampire named Alara, whose eyes flickered with sympathy. His Majesty forbade anyone from disturbing you, Alara whispered. But he paces the halls like a storm waiting to break. Then let him break, Alethea murmured. I have questions that won't sleep. She found Klaus on the balcony overlooking the valley, the dawn bleeding red through the mist. He stood bareheaded, the wind tugging at his dark hair. You've been awake all night, she said. So have you. They faced each other in silence until she finally spoke. If freeing you means my death, say it now. His jaw clenched. It could mean worse. The curse binds our fates. If it breaks, your blood will burn brighter than any mortal's, and the gods may claim what is theirs. Then why not let it stay, she whispered. Why not live as you are? He stepped forward, eyes glinting gold in the dawn. Because every moment I draw breath, I feel the beast inside clawing for release. One day, I will lose control, and the first life I take will be yours. Her heart stuttered. Then perhaps, she said softly, we find another way. Together. Klaus reached for her hand. You would risk your soul for a monster. She met his gaze steadily. Maybe monsters are just men no one dared to save. The wind carried their silence, heavy with something that was no longer fear but something dangerously close to love. Klaus kisses her hand, not as a king, but as a man desperate for redemption. The fire beneath her skin answers. Chapter 12, The First Dream. Sleep finally claimed Alethea, but it was no ordinary rest. The moment her eyes closed, she stood in a dream not her own. The same chamber of echoes appeared, yet this time the altar glowed with living light. The carved figure of Alethea Dumont moved, her stone eyes opening. My blood remembers, Celine's voice echoed like 1,000 bells. And yours will finish what mine began. Alethea tried to speak, but the vision shifted. She saw Klaus, centuries younger, his hands bound by silver, his chest pierced by runes of flame. Celine stood before him, her tears falling as blood. I curse you, hybrid, she said in the dream, to walk eternity alone, until one of my blood sees beyond the monster. The dream shattered in light. Alethea woke gasping, her hands glowing faintly red before fading back to flesh. Moments later, Klaus burst into the room. What happened? I saw her, she whispered. Your curse, and mine. He crossed the room, eyes wild. Then the bond is awakening. Every vision brings the gods closer. What happens when they arrive? He looked at her as though the answer tore him apart. They'll demand payment for the mercy they once denied me. Alethea feels the heat of Celine's mark burning beneath her skin, and Klaus knows, time is running out before destiny consumes them both. Chapter 13, The Blood Oath. The next evening, the castle stirred with unrest. Rumors of rebellion whispered through its halls like a curse carried by wind. Lords who once bowed to Klaus now met in secret, questioning his judgment, his mercy, and the mortal girl who had captured his gaze. Alethea felt their eyes wherever she walked, burning, judging, waiting for her to falter. Yet something inside her had changed since the dream. Her heartbeat thrummed with quiet power. She could hear the pulse of the earth, feel the air stir when she spoke. When Klaus entered the council chamber, the murmurs ceased. His gaze swept the gathered nobles, Vivienne, Lucien, and a dozen others dressed in velvet and deceit. Speak, he commanded. Lucien stepped forward, his voice dripping with civility. We question your attachment to the mortal witch. It endangers the balance of the throne. Klaus's jaw tightened. You mistake devotion for danger. Vivienne's smile was knife-thin. Then prove it, Majesty. Mark her as your own with the ancient right. Let the court see she is bound to you by blood, not whim. A hush fell. Alethea's heart hammered. The blood oath, a ritual binding soul to soul. It was sacred, irreversible, and forbidden between vampire and mortal. Klaus turned to her, his expression unreadable. Do you trust me? Her breath trembled. With everything I have. He drew a dagger from his belt, its blade glowing red. Holding her gaze, he sliced his palm and extended his hand. Without hesitation, Alethea mirrored the gesture. When their blood mingled, a surge of heat exploded through the hall, light flaring, magic screaming awake. Every vampire in the chamber fell silent as red fire coiled around them like living flame. By this bond, Klaus declared, his voice echoing like thunder, no blade, curse, or god shall claim her without facing me first. The flames faded, leaving only the scent of iron and roses. Alethea collapsed into his arms, her pulse and his beating as one. Chapter 14, The Queen of Fire. When Alethea awoke, she was no longer weak. Power hummed beneath her skin like a storm waiting to break. Her wounds were gone, her vision sharper, her heartbeat strange, slower, stronger, echoing with Klaus's own rhythm. Ilara, the young guard, stood at her bedside. You've changed, she whispered. The blood oath does that. It fuses two souls. You share his strength now. Alethea rose, crossing to the mirror. Her reflection shimmered faintly, her eyes glowing a soft, molten gold before returning to their natural shade. And his curse? She asked. Bound to you as well, Ilara said. You carry his pain, and his power. Later, Klaus entered the chamber, his expression unreadable. You should rest. I feel alive, she said simply, for the first time. He stepped closer, his eyes tracing her face. You were never meant for weakness, Alethea. Celine's blood was too wild for mortal chains. Their gazes locked. Between them, the air thickened with heat, unspoken desire meeting the hum of new power. You could have refused, she said softly. You could have let me go. He cupped her face, voice low and rough. And let the gods take you from me? No. I would burn the heavens first. Their lips met, slow, desperate, inevitable. Fire rippled through their bond, lighting every vein with gold. It wasn't gentle. It was consuming, a claiming of equals. When they finally broke apart, the world seemed to tilt. The torches flickered higher, responding to her heartbeat. You see? Klaus murmured. You are fire, little witch. And fire was never meant to be tamed. Outside, unseen eyes watched from the shadows, Lucien's spies, carrying news that would ignite rebellion. Chapter 15, The Storm of Blood. The rebellion began at dawn. Bells rang across the valley, their sound warped by magic and fear. Vampire lords marched under banners of silver and ash, proclaiming that the king had fallen to mortal corruption. Lightning split the sky as the Crimson Castle prepared for war. Klaus stood at the battlements, his cloak snapping in the wind. Beside him, Alethea felt the pull of power surging through their bond, each heartbeat a shared weapon. Lucien's army advanced through the fog, their armor glinting like frost. At their head rode Lucien himself, sword raised high. Come out, old friend, he called, voice echoing. Let us end this reign of mercy and madness. Klaus's growl vibrated the air. Stay here, he ordered Alethea. But she shook her head. No. You don't command me, you chose me. She lifted her hand, and for the first time, magic answered her call. Fire bloomed from her palm, swirling into a living storm that rose above the walls. The rebels hesitated, faces pale with awe. Klaus glanced at her, half in disbelief, half in pride. Celine's gift, he murmured. You've awakened it. Alethea's voice trembled but did not falter. Then let them see the price of their betrayal. When she released the flame, it did not burn, it judged. The battlefield erupted in crimson light, swallowing shadow and steel alike. By the time the fire faded, the rebellion's roar had fallen silent. As ashes rained like snow, Alethea collapsed, her power spent. Klaus caught her in his arms, whispering, You saved my kingdom, and doomed my soul. Chapter 16, The Whispering Veil. The castle was silent after the storm of rebellion, yet peace was a fragile ghost wandering its blood-soaked halls. The dead were buried in unmarked graves beneath the crimson dawn, and the scent of smoke still clung to the air. Alethea woke days later, wrapped in linen and moonlight. Her body trembled, not from weakness, but from echoes. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard whispers. They weren't human, nor vampire. They were ancient, cold, and mournful. Daughter of flame, breaker of oaths, why have you bound yourself to the cursed king? The voice came like wind through bone. She clutched her chest, where the blood oath mark glowed faintly beneath her skin, a sigil that pulsed with gold and crimson veins. Klaus had marked her as his, but something deeper had answered that call. When Klaus entered her chamber, she turned toward him, fear and longing tangled in her eyes. Something's wrong, Klaus. I hear them, the gods your bloodline defied. His expression darkened. The old ones do not forgive easily. The blood oath, it broke their balance. Outside, thunder rumbled across the mountains, though the sky was clear. Can they harm us? She asked. Klaus approached, brushing his thumb across her wrist where the mark shimmered. Not while I breathe. But he lied. He could feel it too, the crackling under his skin, the pull of celestial wrath. The gods were stirring, and their fury was not meant for mortals or monsters, but for those who dared to love across the laws of blood and creation. That night, as Alethea slept, a shadow gathered in the corner of her room. It whispered her true name, one not spoken since the dawn of witches. Chapter 17. The Dream of Chains. Alethea found herself standing in a vast hall of silver mist. It wasn't a dream, yet not quite the waking world either. The floor was glass, reflecting her image and countless others, versions of herself with burning eyes, bleeding hands, and crowns made of flame. From the mist, a woman emerged, tall, pale, her hair white as ash, her eyes like broken stars. "Selene," Alethea whispered, her knees trembling. The goddess smiled faintly. "You carry what was mine. My blood. My defiance. And now, my punishment." Chains of light coiled around Alethea's wrists. She struggled, but the more she fought, the heavier they became. "I did not ask for this power," Alethea cried. "I only wanted to protect him." "Love is never protection," Selene said, voice cold as a grave. "It is destruction disguised as devotion. You have bound yourself to the beast that drank my light. Do you understand what that means?" Images flared. Klaus standing in a burning cathedral, fangs bared, surrounded by fallen angels. His eyes were not his own. They were red and ancient, the same eyes as the gods who cursed him. Alethea gasped, tears streaking her face. "He's not the monster you made him." Selene tilted her head. "No. But he will be, when the blood moon rises." With a sweep of her hand, the goddess touched Alethea's chest, searing a mark over her heart. "Find the truth in his curse, or both your souls will burn when the veil breaks." The world shattered like glass. Alethea woke screaming, Klaus by her side, eyes wide with dread. The mark on her chest glowed like a brand of living fire. In the distant mountains, the first shadow of the blood moon crept across the sky. Chapter 18. The Curse Unveiled. The castle's library smelled of dust and prophecy. Klaus tore through ancient tomes as if salvation might bleed from the pages. Alethea sat nearby, her chest still burning beneath the goddess's mark. "She said the blood moon will awaken your curse," Alethea whispered. "What does it mean?" Klaus hesitated, jaw clenched. "It means the god's wrath will reclaim what was stolen. When the moon turns red, every vampire born of my bloodline will burn, me most of all." "And me." He met her gaze, grief shadowing his expression. "You share my bond now. You'll burn with me." Silence settled, thick and unyielding. Alethea rose, her hands trembling. "Then we break it. We find a way to defy them." Klaus slammed the book shut, frustration flaring in his eyes. "You don't understand, Alethea. This isn't a curse that can be broken. It's divine law. Then we rewrite it." He stared at her, or flickering beneath his anger. "You sound like me." "Maybe you taught me too well," she whispered. A moment passed, a fragile heartbeat of peace before thunder split the air. A messenger stumbled into the hall, blood dripping from his lips. "My king, the veil, it's opening." Klaus turned to the window. Above the mountains, the sky was splitting apart. The blood moon rose, enormous and crimson, painting the world in its light. Alethea's mark flared, and a voice echoed through her mind, "Choose, daughter of flame, love or life." Klaus pulled her close, his whisper trembling with fury and devotion. "Then we choose neither. We choose eternity." Chapter 19. When the sky bled fire. The night turned red. The moon hung low over the world like an open wound, bleeding light across the stone spires of the Vampire King's fortress. Klaus stood upon the highest balcony, cloak thrashing in the wind, eyes blazing gold. Below, his army, thousands of vampires, trembled under the weight of the blood moon's curse. The light seared their skin, their screams rising like a choir of agony. Alethea rushed to his side, her breath catching. "You can't fight the gods, Klaus. You'll burn." He turned to her, a savage beauty in his fury. "I was born of their curse. Let them burn me if they dare." The wind howled, and from the heavens descended shadows of divine form, the old ones, their faces veiled in flame and mist. Their voices thundered across the sky. "You defied eternity. You mingled blood forbidden. For this, your kind shall end." Alethea felt their power crawl beneath her skin. The goddess's mark over her heart pulsed with searing pain, binding her fate to his. She stepped before Klaus, voice trembling but firm. Then take me too. The gods hesitated, just for a breath, and in that moment, Klaus moved. His eyes darkened, and the night itself bent to his will. Bats, storm, and flame rose at his command. He roared, "Touch her, and burn." The world shook. The fortress walls cracked, fire splitting the heavens as the vampire king defied the divine. From the heart of the storm, one god fell, burning, and Klaus realized the war of eternity had begun. Chapter 20. The Ashes of Angels. Dawn never came. The blood moon froze at its zenith, locking the world in crimson twilight. Klaus staggered through the ruins of his throne room, blade slick with divine ichor. Around him lay the remnants of gods made flesh, wounded but not dead. The war was far from over. Alethea tended to him, hands glowing faintly with her inherited light. Her touch burned against his skin, yet it healed him. "You can't fight forever," she whispered. "You'll lose everything." He smiled faintly, even through the blood. "Everything I ever was died the day I saw you beaten in that court. What's left of me belongs to you." Her tears fell silently. The mark on her chest brightened, spreading across her collarbones like molten gold. "If we survive this, we must break the bond, or the world will end." Klaus's jaw tightened. "If breaking it means losing you, then let the world burn." Lightning cracked through the crimson clouds, splitting the air. A voice boomed, Celine's. "Then burn you shall." Suddenly, fire rained from the sky. Klaus shielded Alethea with his body as the fortress roof caved in. Stone and flame cascaded, sealing them in a cathedral of ruin. When the smoke cleared, Klaus lay unconscious, his veins blackened, the mark on his chest fading. Alethea crawled to him, sobbing, pressing her lips to his forehead. "You won't leave me." "Not yet." Her magic surged uncontrollably, white light flooding the chamber as she poured every fragment of her soul into his heart. His eyes snapped open, not gold, not red, but blazing white. The god blood had awakened within him. Chapter 21. The God-Eater. When Klaus rose, the earth trembled. He was no longer merely vampire or king. His veins glowed with divine fire, and his presence cracked the stones beneath his feet. His fangs were gone. In their place, light poured from his mouth when he spoke. "Alethea," he whispered, voice echoing like thunder. "They took everything from us. Now, I'll take it back." From the broken sky descended Celine herself, her form blazing with power. "You are abomination," she declared. "A creature born of defiance." Klaus stepped forward, every movement a storm. "I am what your cruelty made me." The goddess raised her hand, summoning spears of light. Alethea screamed his name, but Klaus caught the spears mid-air. They melted in his grasp, dripping like molten silver. He turned that power back upon her, divine fire answering divine wrath. Celine fell to her knees, her radiance dimming. "End me," she whispered, "and doom the balance forever." Klaus hesitated. His eyes found Alethea, trembling amid the ruins, her face glowing with tears and love. "No," he said at last. "We rewrite it." He plunged his hand into his own chest, tearing free the divine flame. The world shattered in white light, he offering his immortality, she her heart. Their souls collided, burning the curse to ash. When the light faded, the blood moon cracked in half. The gods vanished. And Klaus Mikaelson, the God-Eater, fell into Alethea's arms, mortal at last. Chapter 22. The Mortal King. The storm had ended. The blood moon was gone, leaving only fragments of light trembling across a grey sky. Alethea opened her eyes to the scent of ashes and dew. Klaus lay beside her, his chest rising slowly, warm, human. The divine glow was gone from his veins, replaced by the steady beat of a mortal heart. She touched his cheek. "You're breathing," she whispered, disbelief trembling in her voice. He stirred, eyes opening, no longer gold, no longer eternal. Just a deep, storm-grey blue. "And for the first time, I feel it," he murmured. "The air, the pain, you." Tears welled in her eyes. She had dreamt of saving him, but not like this, not at the cost of his immortality. The once glorious castle was now a ruin, its towers blackened, its throne room flooded with morning mist. The vampires were gone, freed or perished. Only silence remained. Alethea rose, helping Klaus to his feet. He winced, clutching his side. You'll need time to heal. He smiled faintly. Time, how strange that word sounds to me now. They walked through the wreckage, hand in hand, passing broken statues of gods and shattered crowns. In the courtyard, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, pure, golden, unyielding. Klaus stopped beneath it, closing his eyes as the light touched his face for the first time in centuries. Alethea stepped beside him, whispering, "The sun no longer burns you." He turned to her with a soft, mortal smile. "No. It warms me." For the first time, the Vampire King stood in sunlight, and lived. Chapter 23, The Blood Oath Broken. They found the remnants of the blood altar in the depths of the crypt, where the curse had begun and where it must now end. Alethea lit the torches one by one, their flames flickering against the stone walls carved with runes of forbidden love. Klaus followed her, his steps slow but resolute. She stopped before the altar, her fingers trembling. "This is where our souls were bound," she said softly. "If we do not sever the bond, my power will consume you." Klaus stepped close, cupping her face. "You are my power." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Klaus, please, if you remain tied to me, you'll die." He kissed her forehead gently. "Then I'll die loving you." The torches flared as she raised her hand, magic swirling around her. Golden tendrils of light wrapped around their wrists, the mark of their blood oath reawakening for one final time. "Repeat after me," she whispered, voice breaking. "By fire and by blood, I release thee." He hesitated, eyes locked on hers. "And by love," he said instead, "I keep thee." The chamber shook. Light exploded from the altar, tearing through the runes, burning away the curse that had bound them both. Alethea screamed as the power ripped through her, shattering the divine mark on her chest. When it was over, she collapsed, pale and trembling. Klaus caught her in his arms. She looked up weakly. "It's done. You're free." Klaus held her close, tears streaking his cheeks. "You freed me the day you touched my heart, Alethea Dumont." The blood oath was gone, but with it, her life began to fade. Chapter 24, The Dawn and the Vow. The horizon was gold when he carried her from the crypt. The first true dawn in centuries painted the ruins with light. Alethea's breaths came shallow, her skin pale as morning frost. The magic that once burned within her was gone, spent in freeing him. Klaus laid her down beneath the ancient willow by the courtyard, where the first sunlight kissed her hair. "Stay with me," he begged. "Please." She smiled faintly, tracing his jaw. "You always said love defies the gods. Maybe it also defies time." He bent his head, pressing his lips to her brow. "Then let time break before I let you go." Her eyes fluttered closed, her voice a whisper. "Then promise me, when the world forgets our names, you'll still remember." "I will," he vowed, tears falling freely. "I will remember until the stars forget to burn." She smiled once more, and with the rising sun, her body shimmered, turning to motes of golden dust that drifted into the dawn breeze. Klaus wept silently, holding the empty air where she had been. Then, from that same breeze, a whisper answered, "Love never dies, my king." The willow's leaves glowed faintly with her light. Klaus pressed his hand to the trunk, feeling her warmth. And for the first time in his long, cursed existence, he smiled, not as a king, not as a god, but as a man reborn by love. As the sun rose over the ruins of the Vampire King's court, a single vow lingered on the wind. "Lay a hand on her, and burn."